ratio, find the value of each trig ratio from the smallest acute angle to the nearest thousandth. So when we look at this triangle, we should see that something is missing. What's missing? A side. We're given two sides. So how do you find a missing side when you're given two sides? The Pythagorean theorem. On your quiz, you're going to have to be able to do this. I had a student in each of my classes, actually, who raised their hand and said, Ms. Marshall, it's missing a side, so I can't do this problem. Nope, use the Pythagorean theorem. So are we missing A, B, or C? C. I'm going to keep calling it C, because why not? So A would be 48 squared. B is 14 squared. And then we have C squared. 48 squared is? 2,300. And then 14 squared? 196 when we add them together. Good. 2,500 equals C squared. So then what does C equal? 50. Do we circle that answer? No. It's just our third side. So this is what you're going to be doing. We're going to find sine from the smallest acute angle. So what is the shortest side on this triangle? 14. So the smallest acute angle will be across from it, which is C. So sine from C, we're going to label all of our sides in comparison to C. So which one of these is the hypotenuse? 50. And then the opposite. And then the adjacent. 48. So sine is opposite over the adjacent. So we're going to do, opposite over the hypotenuse. So we're going to do 14 over 50. It doesn't say leave it as a fraction, but your quiz you are, so we're going to practice. You're not going to be allowed to use a scientific calculator, so you need to be able to reduce on your own. What is 14 and 50 both divisible by? 2. And 2 goes into 14 7 times. That's what they were thinking of. 50 divided by 2 is 25, so that's part of our answer. The other one wants us to round to the nearest thousandth. 1,000 has how many decimal places? 3, so we're going to round 3 places. So what is this? Rounded to 3 places. 0.28. So you can put a 0 if you want, but it's not going to change it. It's not going to change it. All right. Move on to cosine. So cosine is what side over what side? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So what is the adjacent side? 48. Yep. And then the hypotenuse is? This does reduce. They're both divisible by 2. So it reduces to? 24 over 25. And that as a decimal is 0.96. Good. So again, you could put a 0 at the end if you want to, but it doesn't matter. And then last, we're going to do tangents from C. And it will be opposite over adjacent. So the opposite is 14 and the adjacent. 48. This reduces to 7 over 24. And what is that as a decimal? Rounded to 3 places. This one you'll actually have to round. 0.292. Good. So this is what your quiz is over today. We're going to review what we learned yesterday and then start our new lesson. So we talked about tangent today, yesterday. Use tangent to solve for the value of x. Why can I not use the Pythagorean theorem here? I don't have 2 of the sides. I'm giving an angle and a side. So this means we're going to use a trig ratio. Now, obviously, I told you which one to use. But we are going to label our sides. This is kind of the way you set it up. From 20 degrees, what kind of side is 10? Opposite. And then what kind of side is x? Adjacent. So we are going to use tangent. Tangent from 20 degrees. And it will equal the opposite, which is 10 over the adjacent, which is x. So can I multiply both sides by 10 the way it looks right now? I cannot, because then I would just make this problem larger. You'd have 100 over x. It's not going to happen. So what do we want to do? We're going to flip both sides. So on the right, we have x over 10. And on the left, we'll have 1 over tangent of 20. All right, so then what do I do next? Multiply by 10. Please don't wait for everyone else to give you the answer. You got to make sure you know how to type it in. On a quiz day, I'm not helping you. Type it in. So, go ahead and take the second. 10 times 1 over tangent of 20. Good. So what do we get? We're going to round to the 10th here. I know it doesn't say it. 27.5. Go ahead and flip. We're going to find sine and cosine ratios using this triangle. This is what your quiz is over. This is why you won't use a scientific calculator on it, because you don't need one. What's going to happen is we're going to find sine of s, sine of r, cosine of s, cosine of r. We're actually going to do it in a better order. So sine of s, and then cosine of s. And then after we do those, we'll find sine of r, and then cosine of r, if that makes sense. So we're going to do all of angle s first, and then all of angle r second. Here's why. Starting from s, we're looking into the triangle. Go ahead and label the sides based on s. What's my hypotenuse? 65. What is my opposite?
63.
And then what is my adjacent?
16.
Okay, so if we will flip back and forth, you would have to keep changing the sides. We're just going to do everything from the perspective of s first, and then the perspective of r. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So what is the opposite?
63.
Over 65. We're going to circle that. And then it says round to 4 places as well. So what is 63 divided by 65? 9,692. Cosine of s is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent is 16 over the hypotenuse.
65.
Does this reduce? Nope. So what is this as a decimal? 0.2462. Sorry, I didn't give myself enough room. 0.2462. So now we're going to do the other half of the problem about angle R. So what part of my triangle will change? My opposite and my adjacent. What is now opposite of R? 16. And what is adjacent?
63.
Good. So sine of r, opposite over hypotenuse. What's my fraction going to be? 16 over 65. This should look very familiar. What is 16 over 65 as a decimal? Those of you who just typed it in, you just typed in the same thing twice. It's right here. Cosine of r is adjacent over hypotenuse. So what's the adjacent?
63.
Over the hypotenuse.
65.
All right. And what is that as a decimal? 0.9692. So what you're about to find out on the next screen, same page, next screen on mine, is that there is a relationship between sine and cosine and sine and cosine. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about that. I would highlight around this section. This is actually a really simple and easy, but if you, the next 2 questions. But if you don't look back over this before your quiz or your test, you will probably get this wrong, unless you have a really, really good memory. So I would either highlight the next 2 questions or highlight a box around it, something to that effect, because these are supposed to be like fluff questions to kind of they don't take very much thought. And I'll explain why. Sine and cosines of complementary angles. What does complementary angles, what does that mean? What does it mean about 90? They add up to 90. So here's what we're going to do. Pick sine or cosine, it doesn't matter. Sine. If you look, I have a triangle. You don't have it on your page, okay? Let's say we had sine of 16. What your problem is going to look like, it's going to say write in terms of cosine. So sine of 16 is equivalent to cosine and the complement of 16. Complement means the two numbers will add up to 90. So what is 90 minus 16?
74.
It is 74. So these two are equivalent to each other. So if I asked you to rewrite sine of 16, it would equal cosine of 74. Here's why. Terrell over, you're going to type in your calculator sine of 16. Blake over, you're going to type in cosine of 74. Go. We're going to round 3 places. So Vanasia, what'd you get for sine of 16? 3 places. 276. All right, and then Brooke, what'd you get for cosine of 74? 0.276. So we notice that these two are the same. They're equal to each other. So the answer is cosine of 74, but I'm just showing you why it's the answer. If you rewrite in terms of cosine, you'd write the word cosine, and then you would do 90 minus 16, which is 74. We're going to do another one. We're just going to make up a number. Let's try cosine of, make it easy, between 1 and 90.
55.
Okay. You're going to have to do 90 minus 55, just so you know. So if I wanted to rewrite cosine of 55 in terms of sine, I would write the word sine, and then I would do 90 minus 55, which is 35. So again, Terrell's side of the room, you're going to do cosine of 55, and then Blake's side of the room, you're going to do sine of 35. So Greg, what'd you get for cosine of 55? Write it to 3 places.
0.574.
574. Okay, and then Mike, what'd you get for sine of 35? 0.574. Okay, so what I boxed in, that's the answer. This is just us talking about it. Okay, so we're going to do your 2 examples. This is what it looks like in the book. It's telling you to take 90 and subtract the angle they gave you. That's all. All of these are saying literally the same thing. So we're going to write cosine of 23 in terms of sine. So if I'm writing in terms of sine, what word do I need to have? Sine. Then I'm going to take 90 and subtract 23. 90 minus 23 is? 67. I need you to understand that if you write 67, you are super duper duper wrong. Because 67 is 67, right? Can someone type in sine of 67? What is that as a decimal? 0.92 something? 920. Okay. So is 0.92 anywhere close to 67? It is not. Okay? So you have to write the word sine and then the number 67. Okay? All right, the second one, write sine of 56 in terms of cosine. So again, we need cosine. 90 minus 56 is 34. That's it. Is this simple enough? Okay, so that's why I said it's super simple. It's not meant to be a difficult thing, but you have to look back and look over this section again. Okay? So that was new. This is kind of new. We're going to talk about finding the values of u and t using sine and cosine. Write your answers to the nearest tenth. So we're going to do the same thing that we did yesterday. And that first thing is we're going to label our sides. So from 65 degrees, what kind of side is 8? Hypotenuse. What kind of side is T? Opposite. And that means U is adjacent. All right, so then step 2 is to set up a trig ratio. So yesterday we learned about tangent, right? Don't write this down because it's not going to be accurate. Here's why we can't use tangent here. If I use tangent, from what angle am I looking at this triangle? 65. It would equal the opposite over the adjacent. So what's the opposite? T, and the adjacent is U. So what is the issue if I set up tangent? There's two variables, not enough information. This will not work. This is why we have 3 trig ratios. So we're going to pick a side to find. Do we want to find U or T first?
U.
Sure. So we're going to find U, and then we're going to also use the side that they gave us. So what side did they give us? 8. So we're using the adjacent and the hypotenuse. So which trig function is that?
Cosine.
Cosine. From what angle? 65. And it will equal the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that would be U over 8. Will I need to flip this one? No. I'm just going to multiply both sides by 8. Trial, this one should be fine in your calculator. This one isn't a fraction one. We are rounding to the nearest tenth, like the directions say. So what do we get?
3.4.
3.4. Sorry, I forgot step 3. Step 3 is to solve. I mean, it's pretty simple. Solve. So we know what the value of U is. We need to find the value of T. So we're going to use the opposite side. And then we want to use the side they gave us. Can anybody tell me why we would still want to use 8? Because we know 8 is right? So if we were wrong with 3.4, and then we used it, we would be doubly wrong, right? Also, another reason, was 3.4 the exact answer? It was not. We rounded it. If we if we used a rounded answer in the middle of a problem, solved it, and then rounded again, you're going to be off by a couple digits. So it's best to just use what they gave us. We know for sure the hypotenuse is 8. So we're going to use that. Which trig function? Sine. It's okay. Sine from what angle? 65. Equals the opposite, which is T, over the hypotenuse, which is 8. Did you get the same answer twice? You're not going to. That means you plugged in cosine again. No, don't erase it. This was fine. Try plugging in your calculator again. All right, what did we get? So something to keep in mind. Which one of these is the largest angle? 90 is the largest angle, and it is across from 8, which is the longest side, hypotenuse. So if you look at that, if this angle was 65, what is the measurement of the other angle? What's 90 minus 65? Yeah, it's 25. So which one of these should be the smallest side if 25 is the smallest angle? U should be the smallest side, and that's when we got 3.4. So that's good. 60 is like the medium angle, so it should be across from the medium side, the middle side. So 7.3, it's between 3.4 and 8. Does that make sense? So it's kind of a way to logically think through it. We're going to do one more of these together. We have find the values of x and y using sine and cosine. Round your answers to the nearest tenth. So we're going to first label our sides from 35. What kind of side is x? And then y is? And then 53 is? Good. So we're going to pick one of the letters to solve for. Which one do we want? Sure. So we're going to use x and the hypotenuse. So the opposite and hypotenuse, which is sine. Yeah, so sine from 35 will equal the opposite, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is? Will I need to flip this?
No.
It will not. So the reason that students get this one wrong is they flip the numbers on accident. So make sure it's 53 times sine of 35. What do we get rounded to the 10th?
30.4.
All right, and then we want to solve for y and use the side they gave us, 53. So which trig function am I going to use? Cosine from 53. And it will equal the adjacent y over the hypotenuse 53. Nope. I messed up. See, I just told you. My bad. I fixed it. Hopefully you fixed it. The angle is 35. So do I need to flip this one? No, I still could just multiply by 53. Round to the nearest tenth. You're going to draw a picture. It's not on your page. You can write off to the side. You can write in the bottom corner. It doesn't matter. You do need enough room to do the picture below in a few minutes. But I'm going to teach you a term that we use in this section. You don't have really any word problems until after the next test. So the next test, it basically will be like this problem. It tells you to use sine and cosine. The test after that, it's the same material. It's just not telling you sine, cosine, or tangent. You'll have to figure it out on your own. Does that make sense? So it's the same material, just like a little bit harder. We're also going to be learning about word problems. Again, not on this test, but the test after. So in order to do that, you need to know about an angle of depression and an angle of elevation. So the first thing I want you to draw somewhere is a horizontal line. Horizontal line looks like the horizon. Draw a horizontal line. Don't care where. Good. You're not going to draw all this, so don't be like, I can't draw a boat. I don't want you to. So you have a horizontal line. There is a thing called an angle of depression. An angle of depression is the angle downward from the horizontal line. So you're going to draw a ray going downward from the horizontal line. This is called the angle of depression. So when you think of depression, you think of, being down on life. So depression is an angle that goes downward. From here, you're going to draw another horizontal line. An angle of elevation goes upward. Okay? But both of them are built from horizontal lines. If you don't have a horizontal line, it's not going to be accurate. Okay? So one of the rays is a horizontal line, and then the other one will either point downward because it's an angle of depression, or it will point upward because it's an angle of elevation. So let's think about this. We learned in chapter 3, when you have two lines and a line that cuts through those two lines, what is that line called? It's called a transversal. So you actually have a transversal, and it's the center one. Transversal. It's the center one. So because it's a transversal, there is a relationship between the angle of depression and the angle of elevation. Can anybody guess what that? They're alternate interior. Look at you. So angle of depression, so I wrote AOD. Angle of depression and the angle of elevation are alternate interior angles. Why are they the way they are? All right, so if they're alternate interior angles, what does that tell me about their measures? They are congruent. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to be on this next test, but it will definitely be on the test after. Okay? So the main thing is, both of them have a horizontal line. Angle of depression opens where? Downward, and then angle of elevation opens upward. Good. So we're going to use this on our problem. This is the last one we do. You are skiing on a mountain. Look at you. You look like a pro. A lot of you grew your hair out. That's fine. With an elevation of 1,200 feet, what's another word for elevation? Height. Yeah, height, altitude. The angle of depression. So if you look, again, an angle of depression is a horizontal line and then a ray going downward. Yep. So that's why this is 41 degrees. There's your horizontal line and then a slope going down. So it's 21 degrees. And then it says, find the distance of x, which is right here, that you ski down the mountain to the nearest foot. So you'll actually see a problem like this if you see a submarine problem. Submarines dive downward, obviously, is their goal, at a certain degree. and they'll use like sonar about depth to figure out how far they need to go. So that's kind of a purpose of trigonometry. Anyways, can I use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for this missing side? No. I need 2 side lengths. I don't have that. All I have is 1,200 feet and then 21 degrees. So I need a trig ratio. So I'm going to label my sides from 21 degrees. What kind of side is 1,200 feet?
Opposite.
And then x is hypotenuse. So which trig function am I going to use? Sine. So sine from, what did we say, 21 equals the opposite, 1,200 over the hypotenuse, x. Can I multiply both sides by 1,200? I cannot, so I need to flip both sides. Now I can multiply by 1,200. We're rounding, it says to the nearest foot. That's so we're on the same page, nearest foot. If you think your answer is crazy, please understand the hypotenuse is the longest side, and the altitude was 1,200 feet. So it's going to be much higher, or much bigger than 1,200 feet. So what do we get? 3,349 feet.